Ladies and gentlemen, let's also take this forward, because up next, it's also time to invite one of our very esteemed customers as he talks about achieving One Earth with carbon neutrality. And ladies and gentlemen, he's someone who joined Ashok Leyland in the year 2005 in the product development function, after working for over a decade in the USA at Ford Motor Company, as well as Intel Corporation. He brings with him rich experience in vehicle engineering, verification, and validation. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together to welcome on stage the President and Chief Technology Officer, Ashok Leyland, Dr. N. SARAVANAN.
Good morning. Energy is low already. What happened? It's a pleasure to be back in Bengaluru after, I think, for me, a gap of 5 years, I think. Always a pleasure. To me, it is sort of a little bit of a sad day, yeah? To hear my good friend Bernard saying he's going to move on to a larger role, I assume, of course. I wanted to thank him personally for the fantastic support, both from Ashok Leyland as an industry also. I think I wanted to wish him all the best personally. Thank you very much, Bernard. Yeah. I mean, today's discussion is about sustainability. I thought I'll start some context, yeah? The earth we live in, we've been living for thousands of decades, right? It was peaceful, we were in harmony with nature, but that was not to be, right? Everybody has to improve, people expect to improve their lives. Industrialization happened. After thousands of decades of living in harmony, over the last 30 decades, painfully so, have destroyed what we had. Yeah? So what do we do about it? There are two options. We can stay and fight, recreate what we had, or run away. Both are options, right? Both are possible options. So what do we do? One, exodus, yes. There are people talking about finding a new Earth, new planet, living in Mars, whatever, right? That's not for me. Yeah. I think this is possible. Is it possible? Absolutely, it's possible. Over the next maybe 20 decades, people will find a way to live in space. I'm sure people will love it. But for me, that's not the right plan. For me, there is no planet B. There's no plan B, there's no planet B. For me, this is the Earth I want to live in. I assume a lot of us want to live in, right? I think with that, I want to talk a little bit about what can we do as individuals, as industry, as companies to make this Earth more habitable, right? So what is net zero? It's not that complicated if you look at it, right? Input is equal to output. A lot of us say, how do I maintain my weight? Input is equal to output. Simple. It is simple from equation perspective, but it's a lot more complicated when you get into details. How to make it happen, right? Over the last 200 years, the damage has been done. We continuously pump more CO2 to the atmosphere. It will continue. I'm not saying it is wrong, because people's lives have to improve as population grows. We have to bring up their levels of, living and so on. But I do believe that collectively, we can reverse a change. We can make this a much, much better place to live. So what is the role of transport? I think when you look at decarbonization, net zero, it is not just one industry role, one person role. I think every industry has a role to play. So I'm today singling out transportation industry. That's where I come from. So I think from our perspective, we see that we do have a significant role to play in the decarbonization. As you see, transport sector stands right there across power industry and transport. I'll talk a little bit about what is that we see as trends going on in the transport industry, what are the challenges, and more importantly, how do we do this transformation more sustainably? Yeah. Within transportation, I think, unfortunately or fortunately, the truck industry has a larger role to play. And I think it is what it is. And let's see how do we go about decarbonizing the transport sector itself. It is not just decarbonization. what happens is, in addition to decarbonization, there are a lot of other challenges that come up, other drivers that drive the whole transport industry. Of course, global warming, decarbonization. There are also challenges in terms of at a local level, pollution levels, in terms of health concerns. There's also consumer demand in terms of expectation of more greener vehicles and so on. As countries, we also deal with energy security. And this gets more highlighted with all the geopolitical issues. So that's the challenges. It's not just decarbonization. It's a lot more going around that. India specific, it becomes more intense, particularly in terms of pollution levels being high. Unfortunately, we have some of the worst polluting cities in the world. We're already seeing the challenge of global warming. I don't know how many believe it or not, but see what's happening. The floods, the temperature, the low monsoons, and so on and so forth. And also we have a target in terms of 2070 being the, as a country, decarbonizing. So it's a collective thing of decarbonizing as a country. We want to be energy sufficient, sort of, and so on and so forth. Yeah. So what do we do about it? From a truck industry, from a commercial vehicle industry, is there really a green vehicle? How many believe there's a truly a green vehicle? Anybody believes a green vehicle? This is the only green vehicle possible. Yeah. Every vehicle has a footprint in CO2. Yeah. It's a question of how do you manage that carbon footprint? How do you minimize the footprint at production? How do you minimize the footprint in operations? And that's the key. And that opens up a whole host of opportunities, different combination of technologies and so on. And there is no single solution. Just like even for food in India, no single solution. I think the challenge is how do we navigate this ecosystem of multiple opportunities and challenges, and how do we get there sustainably is the key. So I just think about how do I put the entire gamut of possibilities in terms of technologies and fuels into a simple, as engineers understand, a Venn diagram, right? To say what are the possibilities in terms of new energy. To me, it's basically a combination of three things. New alternate fuels, low carbon fuels. There could be hydrogen, there could even be e-fuels, e-diesel, and so on. I also believe there is a role for next generation IC engines. Yeah? I think there is no zero in this game. I think, there's no 0 or 1 in this game. It's a scale. We need to get there, we need to get somehow, and therefore there's a role for next generation ICE, not burning diesel necessarily, but burning hydrogen is a possibility. Then of course electrification plays a key role. So it's a combination of all this that gives you these multiple combinations of possibilities. So what's happening in the world? Till 2020, if you talk to anybody in the automotive industry, particularly worldwide, they were happy. They're making diesel vehicles, gasoline vehicles. Predominantly, there were some companies like Tesla trying to say electrification and so on, but people are saying by and large, we will survive. But then came this decade, what I call the messy decade. It's getting messier day by day with every stakeholder, including industries, OEMs having to tackle with not just one technology, multiple technologies, having to navigate both in terms of technology and investments. So I do believe companies that actually navigate this transition will be the companies that actually survive. Not just do well, but survive, yeah? The question is survival. So it is this messy decade. The question is how do we navigate this messy decade? As an example, just to give you a little bit more detail and color, right? If you look at in this chart, the rows are sort of the technologies available, and the columns are typically what we use in truck industry in terms of applications or GVWs or type of trucks. If you actually see, every combination is almost possible. Yeah? Only varying levels of shades of possibilities. The question is, how do we navigate this? And I think, mind you, it is no more about just technology as a product. It's also how do we have the entire ecosystem available for these technologies available. I'll just talk about it a little bit more later on. Yeah? So it's technology combinations, everything is possible, but not without challenges. Yeah? Actually look at it from this perspective. Diesel looks very good in every aspect, except, of course, emissions, right? from a carbon perspective. Not very good. Every technology has own challenges. If you take battery electric vehicle, there's a challenge of initial cost. There is a challenge in commercial vehicles of payload loss because batteries take up quite a bit of stuff. There is a challenge at this time of charging time and so on. But it is therefore important for us to figure out how do I navigate this ecosystem so that I achieve the ultimate goal of decarbonizing not just the industry, not just the country, but the world. So I'll just walk you through an example of what happens, challenges in electric vehicles, electric truck, for example. Right? One is, of course, the initial cost. Yeah? Currently, at least in the Indian context, you see the electric vehicles, the trucks, or the fuel cell are 3 to 3.5 times of a typical diesel vehicle. You can argue, yeah, but he can buy this vehicle and he can run it for thousands of kilometers and the TCO will work out. But somebody has to finance the person, right? Somebody has to finance the deal. So it's not the straightforward saying that I will replace the vehicle. It's not as straightforward as two-wheelers and cars. There's a challenge there, but the challenge is much, much more pronounced in a commercial vehicle. One is the cost. The second is the fact that nothing is green. If you actually look at the greenhouse gases emissions during production, if you look at the production stage, at the product stage, battery vehicles actually are more intense. What actually happens is, over the life cycle, the total TCO, carbon footprint of the entire vehicle becomes less and less as you operate more and more. But the challenge there is you have to operate with green electricity, not necessarily with the thermal power plants that we have in the world today. Yeah? That's a challenge. So it's a question of initial cost, recovering footprint being higher in some of the new energy vehicles, recovering that over time in terms of carbon by operating the vehicles with clean power. So look at the complications here. It doesn't stop there. You have to look at ecosystem of greener power. Of course, India is lucky in certain ways in terms of being able to have both wind and solar possibilities much higher. It doesn't stop there. What actually happens to the whole sustainability perspective? Yeah? You see people getting into the system saying, battery electric vehicle. Very few talk about recyclability. What happens at the end of life? Yeah? I think that's going to be one of the fundamental problems we have to solve. So, I talked about sort of what is the possibilities and challenges. But if you look at from an engineer's perspective, product perspective, it's not about just saying, I'll develop a green vehicle. Yeah? It's about a lot more than that. Some of the challenges includes, at the same time, customers want connected vehicle. They want tailor-made for the application, no compromise. There are also a whole host of regulations coming in. There's also, in terms of new business models kicking in. At the same time, all this with the need for better TCO and reliability. Seems like an impossible problem, but you know, when things are difficult, that is when I think innovation happens. Yeah. So some of the key, I think, drivers that can enable this transition to happen include, for example, in my view, two things in my view. One is modularity. Other is more and more use of, I would call virtual simulation, call it digital twin, virtual simulation. I think that those two are the key for industry to tackle this challenge of multiple options to be worked on. Yeah. I'll just walk you through some of the key possibilities there. Yeah. So how do we sort of take this complex problem, right? I always want to think about it in simple terms, right? We need to go back to the drawing book and say, how do I design something much simpler? Example of a chair. You can make it very complicated, but the purpose is to have a place for somebody to sit. We can keep it simple. So I think we need to go back and say, if I want to have my product designed to be more sustainable, my argument is start with thinking simple. Thinking simple leads to much, much more simpler solutions. Some aspects, I would say here, both modularity and digital twin play a key role there. I'm saying you buy digital simulation over physical validation. It's not easy. You have to get over your legacy mindset and say, how do I sort of do this? Modularity, which I'll show in a video subsequently as to how it helps in terms of speed, not just speed, but also be able to tackle the number of parts, inventory, and so on and so forth. And more importantly, lightweighting such materials for production and so on. Just going through quickly some of the possibilities in terms of simulation, just for going through electrification as example. I think we have to be more progressive as industry in terms of looking at simulation rather than physical validation. And that's the key. Yeah? This is an example of a fuel cell. This happens to be part of the platform 3D experience, looking at how do you look at not just as integration, but also the entire value chain of hydrogen. Lightweighting as an example. Of course, going down to lean production. So what is Ashok Leyland doing about it? Some of the focus areas for us, not to make this a marketing slide for Ashok Leyland, but we are in the entire gamut of products, all the way from small commercial vehicles to heavy duty, looking at electrification, fuel cells, even use of hydrogen across the spectrum of vehicles. And I just want to show you the power and use of, for example, the modularity platform we have. Yeah, how it helps us navigate the multiple fuel options. This is a heavy truck platform. This is a diesel platform. As you will see, this goes from a diesel to next to the CNG platform, which is quite popular in India. The tanks go out, the fuel tanks, diesel go out, these CNG tanks come in, engine change, exhaust change, everything else remains same. Now you have an entire gamut of CNG vehicles. Next is LNG vehicle. CNG tanks go out, LNG tanks come in, engine changes, it's LNG vehicle. And you continue to have commonality parts with diesel. This is a hydrogen IC vehicle. The tanks go in, engine changes from diesel to hydrogen, exhaust changes. You have the entire platform possibility on it. Again, talking about a proven diesel platform getting converted as we see. Yeah. Fuel cell, little bit more changes, little bit more, but still the platform remains the same from modular perspective. Electric vehicle, of course, battery packs go in. It's not just one configuration vehicle. You'll see that this applies to multiple configurations of vehicle. It's not just different architectures, right? It's not just one. The entire platform can be changed because of modular. And that key is that. Yeah. So how do you go about it? I think one thing, as I also heard from other speakers, is we have to measure to manage sustainability. I think, yes, measure from cradle to grave. I think that's the key aspect of it. Second, I think just to summarize, nothing spectacular here, but just the fact that we have to take the path, we have to leverage technology to do that. But before I end the presentation, I wanted to show you 2 slides. Yeah? A lot of us will think, oh, what is this guy talking about change? It's going to happen, it won't happen. I've seen it for 30 years. This is an example of New York, I think 5th Avenue. Picture shows horse-drawn carriages, 1910. The other on the right shows, within 10 years, not a single horse-drawn carriage. That is the possibility of transformation. And when you talk to people at that time, they said, oh, no, motor vehicles are dangerous. Gasoline is flammable. Just like we talk about batteries now, right? Same. You go back in history, you'll see the same arguments. I think all I'm saying is transformation can happen. They can happen very fast. But it is not too late. One more example. There's a company called McLaughlin. Yeah? They were a Canadian company. They were majorly into horse-drawn carriages. This is their ad in the 1910 period, where they show that cars are no good. Yeah? Horse-drawn carriages. But they were smart enough to transform and became a car company in 10 years. It was never too late. Yeah? Expect a change, be a part of the change. Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.